Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
I am thrilled to welcome my newest guest to the Resume Storyteller podcast. As a co-founder and CEO at Vervoe, an online hiring platform that replaces face-to-face interviews with online simulation, Omer is on a mission to reinvent the recruiting experience and make it effective, fair, and enjoyable. His experience building teams and being a candidate himself on the other side of things has led him to believe that people should be given a chance to show what they can do now in the future versus being judged on where they've been in the past. Omer is a successful career changer. Prior to co-founding Vervoe with David Weinberg, he led corporate finance solutions team of 25 at National Australia Bank, led an international emergency response program at the Red Cross, and served as a platoon commander in Israel's defense forces. Having been a leader in large corporations, the humanitarian sector, the military, and now a fast-growing startup, Omer has a unique perspective on workplace culture, motivation, and what it takes to make teams successful. So, Omer, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for that introduction, Virginia. It's great to be on the show.
So, I did a quick blurb, but can you provide us with an overview of what Vervoe is all about? Because this is really groundbreaking in terms of, impacting the job search market.
Sure. So, Vervoe is a platform that helps employers and candidates connect with each other in a fundamentally different way that is based on merit rather than background. So we like to focus on what people can do rather than, where they went to school or what opportunities they were given or what logo they're associated with. And the way that we do that is by giving candidates a chance to prove their skills by doing on-the-job tasks.
Can you give me an example of how that might work?
Yeah, it can be as simple as designing a logo or watching a video of an angry customer and responding or doing an Excel test. It can be more nuanced than that, or it can be very advanced as well. It's really up to the employer, and it depends on what they're trying to solve for, whether they just want to get a feel for how someone responds or whether they want to do advanced skill testing or character-based assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's very flexible. So the point is to try and think about what are the activities that you want someone to do in the job and be successful, and try and capture a snapshot of that. So our starting point was really, imagine a restaurant and you're hiring a cook and you get that person to come and spend a week with you in the kitchen to see how they work with other people and how they, make food. And so really what we've done is use technology to do that at speed and at scale.
So fast real-time simulations.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay. So how did you come to be in this role? Tell me how Vervoe got founded.
So, both David and I were running big teams, and we constantly came across people who were very impressive on paper, but not necessarily qualified to do the job or not necessarily, displaying the right attributes. And conversely, we had people in our teams who went to universities that weren't, well-known or Ivy League schools and weren't necessarily as well credentialed on paper, but were absolutely amazing. And so we realized very quickly that, there's this disconnect between how someone looks on paper and how they actually perform. And there's got to be a different way to figure out who is the right person for a job. And that was the starting point for us in trying to come up with a totally different way to hire people.
Interesting. And do you see applications for this from everywhere from entry level all the way up to senior executive hiring?
Yeah, I think our experience has been that it tends to work better for up to mid-level roles. And then our platform has definitely been used for more senior roles, but with a slightly more nuanced approach and probably more human intervention along the way. Very senior people like to be treated a little bit differently and with a bit more of a human touch. And so we've seen that with more senior roles, hiring managers tend to combine online and offline more so than with junior roles, but certainly there's been a really big cross-section of role types and role levels.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you this. You've probably been exposed now to a variety of different types of candidates, different industries. What do you see as one or two major challenges facing those that are, dipping their toe in the job search waters or trying to make a career change today?
So for candidates, I mean, this is a totally different way of doing things, and the reactions, they vary. So some people, love it, and this is an opportunity. The main thing that this gives candidates is they don't have to wait. They don't have to, face this situation of never hearing back. They get an opportunity almost immediately to prove themselves. And by and large, for the majority of people, they relish that. Now, at the same time, being put in a situation where you have to perform tasks online in an environment that's unfamiliar and sometimes under time pressure can be daunting. And I think, there is a level of, I don't know if education is the right word, but certainly a level of, adaptation and familiarity that needs to come with that. And I think it's going to take a little while for people to get used to this way, this much faster, much more dynamic way of applying for jobs.
What advice could you give someone who's preparing to interview using this sort of format?
I think practice, and it's really not difficult. It can just be unfamiliar and uncomfortable like anything new. And so practicing a couple of times recording yourself on camera, because typically video can be the most difficult part. And all the rest is just, practicing your skills and being prepared to demonstrate what you know and having confidence. I think when people are assured of their skills, they do very well. It's just sometimes that when there's time pressure or when a camera flips on, all of a sudden, people can feel uncomfortable with that. But once you clear out the cobwebs, that absolutely, and it can be confronting, right? And I think if you clear out the cobwebs, and we do at the beginning of every assessment, there's a chance to test your equipment and do a practice question, and that tends to settle things. But I think for some people this will take a little getting used to, and that's totally understandable. And we have gone to great lengths to make that process as smooth as possible and seem like an opportunity rather than a hurdle. But it's a total shift in mindset for people applying for jobs.
So just to explain the software a little bit, is there someone on the other end watching the video in its entirety, or is it software that's then sort of identifying certain keywording and key phrasing? How do candidates bubble to the top with this sort of a platform versus the applicant tracking software that is in place now with so many large corporations? Yeah,
great question. So at the front end, we don't run any algorithms. And what I mean by that is we don't do matching based on CVs or profiles to prevent people from beginning their interview. So everyone gets a chance when they apply to start an interview, okay? And then all the analysis comes after. Now, we're actually very careful with that because our default position is subjectivity. Every employer looks for something different. So we don't want to deal in absolutes and make decisions on behalf of employers and say candidate A is good or not good. We don't really subscribe to that. Now, we do have some assessments that are auto-graded, and they tend to be multiple choice and text for things that are binary where there's a right answer. And we don't run analytics on video. We're not, we think facial recognition is discriminatory, and that's not an area that we want to go into. So for anything like video, it's totally subjective. It's up to the employer to decide if it resonates with them or not.
Interesting. Okay. So what advice can you give someone who is currently engaged in the job hunt without success? How can they use a platform like yours to show their skills?
We found that, so the best feedback from our customers is when they tell us that they've hired someone they otherwise would not have considered based on a resume. So using the traditional process. And that's very powerful for us. And if you flip that and think of the candidate, really what they're telling us is that we've given them insight somewhere that has made them consider someone that, based on a resume they may not have. And so what I take out of that is that we're giving candidates a chance to tell their story. And I think that's very powerful. And I think people should not despair. More and more employers are being open to looking at things differently and giving people a chance to tell their story. And when you do that, amazing things can happen. And so my advice would be persevere and find companies that want to listen to you and get to know you for who you are, not for, a bunch of statistics that are summarized on a piece of paper.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of someone, a lot of my clients are career changers. They have expertise that can really go across a lot of different industries, which makes putting their story to paper that much more complex.
Yeah.
Do you have any different words of wisdom to that kind of person whose skills are really diverse and who could sort of pop in a number of different directions?
Well, we came across someone who applied for a job in at a technology startup, and that person's background was in the trucking industry. And, that's very hard to get across on paper. But when we listen to this person tell his story about how he taught himself how to code and listened to every podcast and built an app and did all these things. And it wasn't just all those facts, it was the passion that came across. And that was very compelling. And so for someone changing careers, I think the effort that they make and the passion that they have for the new direction, it's very important to get that across, whether it's on a resume or in an interview or a video, it doesn't matter. And that almost becomes more important than, what the skills are, what they did before, because that passion to go in a different direction can be infectious.
No, and I love the idea of this as the gate of entry versus the paper as the gate of entry, because the paper can then support it, but there's a different mindset, I think, when someone has seen the person and learned about them and sort of heard, to your point, heard their story. How long? I mean, I imagine the interview process or each interaction is different, but are these 10-minute interviews, a half hour? What should someone expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we tend to give a guide of, around 10 questions and 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
Tops and then there are exceptions. So there are, advanced coding challenges or design exercises, but we recommend doing those as a second stage. So for candidates who've made it to stage 2 and been shortlisted and, have a much bigger incentive. But at the first stage, you really want to keep it to kind of, even 15, 20 is a good length of time. And you don't want people to feel like they're just having to do a ton of work.
And you've seen HR organizations or hiring managers willing to listen to hours of or view hours of video? Because this is quite a lot for the person who's in those hiring decisions.
Yeah, so we also recommend 1 to 2 video questions per assessment max for that, that exact reason that, first of all, when you watch a video of a candidate once, you probably get 90% of what you wanted to get out of that. And there's no need to see that person again and again. The video questions or the video answers tend to be more about how someone communicates and how passionately they can talk about something rather than the substantive content itself. And so it does get tiring for hiring managers, as you've implied. And so we really recommend to keep that to 1 or 2. And the other thing that we've noticed, and I'm not sure if I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it's observed behavior, is hiring managers don't always look at all the responses. They tend to look at the first few. And if it's someone that they feel is not right, they might skip. And so the process of then looking at the responses tends to be very quick. And then they spend more time on people that really click for them.
Well, that makes sense. And the people read the same way. They read the same way they look. If it's compelling, they'll spend a little bit more time than they, get that initial gut instinct or reaction that it's not someone that's appealing. So what are your thoughts on age discrimination when it comes to hiring practices and how this platform could potentially impact that?
Yeah, and it's not just age. I mean, there are all forms of discrimination, all forms of bias.
Right. That's exactly right.
And this is an issue that, we're talking about and thinking about all the time. And we're not out there saying we eliminate all bias. I think that would be, everyone is a human, and I don't think that's even possible. But what we do, what I think we have achieved, which is powerful, is we're delaying the point at which you're forming a view on a candidate from that initial application to after they've responded, so to after they've done tasks. And so we're not ignoring the age, gender, ethnicity. We're not ignoring all that. Employers can get all the data they want on people. And if they're determined to rule people out for an arbitrary reason, we can't stop that. But something very powerful happens when, as a hiring manager, your first impression of a candidate is formed when you watch how they respond to tasks that are relevant to the job. And when you see that they do a great job, the brain is rewired and you care less about all these background factors and you care more about how good a job they've done. And so then you consider people that you probably wouldn't have considered before. And that is something that theme is, right across the board with our customers. And we're very proud of that, by the way.
Yeah. So it's a way to sort of to mitigate bias. My clients come to me a lot of times struggling because not so much with the age and those other kinds of discriminations, but just sort of biases around, well, how are your skills transferable to my industry? And it's hard to convey that on paper. You can do your best, but the preconceived notion is there. But to your point, I think an opportunity to get in front of someone, that's all they want. And your platform giving them that opportunity.
Exactly. And, right. And I'll give you an example I'm happy to admit my own bias. When we were hiring, when we hire, I can't help but kind of picture, I have kind of this picture in my head of what an ideal candidate will be and will look like. And I've experienced myself where I get proven completely wrong because all of a sudden these candidates that didn't fit this kind of picture that crept into my head, these candidates come through and they're amazing. And then I kind of, something doesn't compute. And then I have to train myself to think and say, well, actually, no, this is how it's supposed to work. Someone has just proven that they're, an amazing fit. And this is not what I had in mind. And great, the system's worked. And now we're going to consider someone that, we probably wouldn't have beforehand. And having experienced that myself, I really realized, it made me realize that this is the same sensation, the same experience that our customers are having. And it is compelling. It is very powerful.
And do you then ever go back and match the candidates against their piece of paper? And does that strengthen the case? I guess it depends on the strength of the paper, but what are your thoughts on that?
The way I think about it is that the pillar of the hiring process is the simulation, is getting people to do tasks. And then complementing that are reference points. And one is a CV. And another might be a portfolio of work samples. And there are others. There are lots of others. Might be a short video bio. And then we speak to them. And then if there are gaps, we reference check. But those are things that augment, right? So they may fill in gaps. They may validate certain things. But by and large, we've already formed a strong view based on how someone does a simulation. And that rarely ends up being wrong. And I think, so we're not discounting other references. They are still there to be drawn on and used, but they end up being supplementary, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, yeah, and it's part of the whole package, I imagine.
Exactly.
So in your view, what are one or two tools then that a job seeker needs, in their tool belt that they really cannot be without during a career journey or a job search? So,
we talked about practicing before, and I think, and there are tools out there to do practice interviews, but that's only going to be partially helpful because you don't really know what hiring process you're going to fall into. The other thing is, I think it's important for people. I don't want to use I'm trying to avoid using the personal brand cliche, but it is important. I think it is important for people to know their brand and to know what they stand for and how they're going to be perceived.
Value.
That's right. And I think employers will dig around, whether, it doesn't matter how pure the process is and whether people admit it or not. Employers they'll go to LinkedIn and Facebook and they'll check up on people. And I think, the digital footprint that people leave today is incredible. And I think that people that take pride people who take pride in whether it's their LinkedIn profile or whatever it is, whatever's relevant to their industry and demographic, it can make a difference. It can make a really positive difference, or it can be harmful if they do things that are damaging. So that's the other thing. I think doing a little bit of an audit, a social audit, can be very important. And then the third thing I'd say, and this is maybe, especially relevant in the startup ecosystem, is side projects and all the things that come in addition to the primary job. And people, in the world that we live in, and I'd say this is probably true of big corporations as well, employers care about character and they care about attitude, and it's hugely important. And so there is such a focus on technical skills for on the candidate side, but actually we want to know you. We want to know who you are and what you care about and how hard you're going to try and how much potential you have. And I think candidates don't invest enough putting that forward. And I think that when we see someone who is so passionate and is going to try hard, that can almost outweigh anything else. So I would encourage candidates to talk about that as well.
And do you feel like there's an opportunity to promote that through their social media, make sure that that's a part of their digital footprint?
Absolutely. And also through the hiring process as well. And so when people are passionate about a certain topic, or when people go the extra mile in their previous job or volunteer or whatever it is that they care about, it's going to be impossible to hide. It'll come out everywhere. It comes out in discussion. It comes out in how they do tasks. It comes out on social media. And so, and I think that's good. I think people shouldn't just try and have their work hat on and they're kind of just show their work persona. They should show who they are. And hiring managers love that. It's compelling.
I agree. It personalizes the candidate. There's no need for silos. But that didn't used to be the case 10 years ago. I'm thrilled to see that that's evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're seeing with our customers. And, we're hiring humans. We're hiring human beings. I think that gets lost a little bit in the whole technology landscape. At the end of the day, it's a human hiring another human. That's all, to collaborate. That's all that's happening here. And technology is supposed to make that easier and more efficient and give more insight. But if the technology makes that process colder and more robotic, then we've failed.
Very good point. Thank you. So what's next for you? What's next for Vervoe? What are you excited about?
We're excited about finding interesting ways to give employers more insight into particularly how candidates do interviews. And what I mean by how is not just the actual responses, but how they're approaching tasks and whether they're doing them at speed or taking their time, and what does that say about their personalities? Are they risk takers? Are they cautious, as one example? And what kind of level of intensity are they bringing? There's a lot of data we can gather from that. And the other thing is, at a really simple level, the candidate experience is something we will never stop working on, because without that, we have nothing. I mean, it's all about, if we can't deliver a great candidate experience, then employers won't get value. And so we will continue to find ways to address some of the things that we've discussed earlier around the discomfort and making candidates feel like really this is an opportunity to relish, not some sort of hoop to jump through. And so I think they're the two main things that we're very, very focused on. We spend a lot of energy and time building and refining and innovating.
Omer, thank you so much. This is incredibly exciting. I have to admit, when I first started hearing about software like this, I thought, oh gosh, this just seems like one more intimidating hoop. But the notion that it helps to bring the human hiring human process, it brings it to the forefront versus having it be a secondary or a third part of the process, I think is where we need to go, because it benefits everyone. So thank you.
Absolutely. And one of the three principles for us is human. And we never forget that. It's all about using technology to deliver a more human experience. And we try not to lose sight of that. And we've got a way to go. It's a journey. But it's been great to chat with you. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing.
Well, thank you. If anyone wants to learn more about his company, the website is www.vervoe.com. And thank you again.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's skim online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.